y'all. Welcome to the Bless Your Books blog. I'm Stephanie Edwards. I'm a romantic suspense author based in Knoxville, Tennessee. And I have my co host, Courtney Turner Hoyle, and our guest author, Robert Gwaltney, here with me tonight. Very excited to have both of them with me. Courtney and Robert, please introduce yourselves and talk a little bit about what you write.
Sure. Courtney, will you want to go first?
I can. I am a multi-genre writer. My most recent release is Finding David. It is the second book in the series of It's About Time. The first book in the series is Finding Emma. I also have thrillers, paranormal mysteries, anything that you can think of, I've probably written it. Robert?
So I'm a debut novelist and a writer of Southern fiction. I say that it has Gothic tendencies and elements of magical realism. And so the title of my debut novel is The Cicada Tree.
Yeah, and what a debut. It's really taken the Southern fiction world by storm. I've been overwhelmed by your success. I hope you have been. I hope you've been really happy to see just all the praise and interest that your book has drawn. What do you think sets this book apart?
Gosh. Well, when I set out to write the book, it was my hope, really, it was just my intention to write the book that I've been looking for and not been able to find. And so I really didn't think about the market when I was writing the book. I thought, well, perhaps if I write something that I love, maybe people will find their way to it as well. So I hope that that it resonates with individuals because that they can see bits and pieces of truth of themselves and others in the book, and I hope that others find it entertaining and unique.
I definitely think that they do. From what I've read, other people say, and I know from my own experience of reading the book, it is very unique.
Thank
Um,
you.
oh, you're very welcome. Courtney, did you have a question?
So, what gave you the inspiration for the plot and the characters in the book?
So I actually says the Cicada Tree was born from another book that I'd begun to write, and the book was going to take place in the 1970s. The protagonist was a little 11-year-old boy, and his mother was Annalise uh, Newell Darlington. And Annalise Newell is the protagonist, 11-year-old protagonist in the Cicada Tree. So when I was writing this first book, uh, I became so fascinated with the mother. She was just making these really interesting and horrible parenting choices, and I just started to ask her questions. Gosh, why are you like this? What mess you been like as a child? And so that really was the genesis of the Cicada Tree. It started as a different book, and so I just pulled it back to 1956, and I had a sense overall of the main things that would happen in the book. I didn't know everything that would happen, and that's sort of my process when I write. I like to know the major thing that's going to happen in the first, second, and third act. Then I just sort of let the characters tell me how to get there. Because for me, I think part of the exciting um, aspect of writing is discovering every time that you sit down at the computer. I don't enjoy knowing everything that's going to happen in the book.
I agree. It's great to have those little surprises that come up. And I've wondered before if people who plot their novels, if they still surprise themselves or if it's all very strategized. I'm a pantser 110%. So I can't imagine what that feels like to be a plotter. Courtney, do you want to talk about your methods?
I can. I wrote My Brother's Keeper just from one little idea, and it just it grew from there. I wrote one sentence, and everything just seemed to fall into place. I have thought ahead, like, oh, well, I think that I want certain situations to go this way, but then my characters still surprise me. So I mostly am a pantser, but tried. It's really hard when you try to organize as much as I do in my life, and then sit down and write without any kind of organization. So I can't. I would be lying if I said that there wasn't a little bit of organization to the writing.
Yeah, I think I'm in a middle place. You know, I have notes. I have a sense of for this next project that I'm working on. I have like a 5-page summary, so I have a sense of what I want to accomplish. But I don't know everything that's going to happen.
Would you like to tell us a little more about your book?
And what I'm working on next?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sure. So that this story takes place in 1931 on a fictitious Georgia coastal barrier island I'm calling Good Hope. And I'm really, really putting my toes into magical realism much more than I did in the Cicada Tree. And there's an element of world building that I didn't do in the Cicada Tree that I'm doing with this new book. And the working title right now is called Sing Down the Moon. And it's told in first person from the perspective of a 14-year-old girl. Her name is Leontine Sky. She lives on the marsh with her mother, who's in the early stages of dementia. And and her mother's name is Eulalie Sky. And all the Sky women that have come before had this task of tending this ancient tree named Damascus. And it's I call the tree a haint trap tree because it sort of sings to the haints across the river and lulls them over. And it's from these haints that are captured in the tree that Eulalie makes this highly addictive drug called redemption. And the individuals that seek out this drugs that are called sinners. That's sort of there's a whole lot that takes place in this story, but I'm really excited about it. So we'll see. I'm trying to stretch myself as a writer and trying to continue to grow. It'll be Southern fiction. It'll have elements of the Southern Gothic and much more magical realism in it than the Cicada Tree.
There is a city near where I live called Damascus. Where did you get the name Damascus?
Gosh, names are so important to me. I toil and toil over naming things because I think that names are important. Damascus, because it's a very old tree. I was trying to think of very old cities that I could name it after. So it has a biblical background, a biblical underpinning to it.
Interesting. I really like that origin story. That's always fun. I think that's what's interesting about doing this type of interview or doing an author takeover is getting to learn those little tidbits that really make up the author's vision for their book. So it's very cool to see. So, Robert, one question about the cicada tree and your future projects. Your writing in cicada tree is so melodic. Um, I know I'm not the only person who's commented on that. Do you think you'll have the similar style in your upcoming projects, or are you trying a different writing style?
Well, I'm drawn to lyrical quality of writing, so I think that I won't say ever, forever, and always because we just don't know. But for now, I'm definitely I've always been drawn to other writers' work whose writing possesses a lyrical quality, and it's something that I enjoy trying to accomplish in my own writing. So the next project that I'm working on, Sing Down the Moon, I believe certainly has a lyrical quality to it, and the voice of this young 14-year-old protagonist I think is very interesting. She has sort of a poetic way of speaking.
That's great. I find it very interesting. It's not your writing style is very different and refreshing from what most modern day authors, including Southern fiction authors, use. So it's very interesting to me. And I can't imagine the amount of time that you put into making everything so tightly crafted. Um, I have a journalism background, so I'm very much like, these are the events that happened. And I can be super descriptive in how they happened, but I'm just very direct in the way that I explain things happening. So I admire your writing and your style. Just it's just so different and interesting to me.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I do work very hard on the line level, and I'm a slow writer, and I do tend to agonize over things. I think that I tend to sort of override a bit, and then of course in editing I always have to pull myself back. But I figure sort of first pass, you just go for it. You embrace the language, the voices of the character, and then of course when you go back through, if it's I think my work is sort of a combination of being character and plot driven. So you don't want to slow the plot down. So you just want to make sure that everything that you're writing isn't self-indulgent, that's giving service to the story.
Hmm. For sure. We all know the pitfalls of that and having to tie everything together and make sure everything clicks together like a puzzle. You're building on each scene builds on the next, and you just have to make sure that there's an odd piece out here hanging out on its own. So I think you're very right in saying that.
So, what do you have that you plan to do outside of writing? Is there something on your author journey that's outside of writing that's coming up?
Well, all of this is really quite new to me. When the cicada, prior to the cicada tree coming out, there was so much about the world of publication and releasing a book that I didn't know. So I had to quickly um, school myself and learn a great deal. You know what? Having a conversation with you ladies really is sort of a skill set that no one can really train you on. It's just something that you're able to gain through experience. So, I think that for me, um, I knew how I write. It's hard. It was very difficult for me to talk about my process of writing because it's something that I've not ever done before. So one of the things that I've tried to do is say yes to everything that scares me. So, being invited to do things, but being on podcast initially, that was a very terrifying experience for me. Because you're thinking, what am I going to say? I don't know that I have anything to say that might be of interest to anyone. A couple of things that I've been invited to do that I've not ever done before is attend a couple of, there's going to be a Clarksville writers conference in June, and I've been invited to do two speaking sessions, and then I've been invited to do the same thing for Atlanta Writers Club. So that really is sort of outside of that. It's really me talking about writing, which is something that I've not ever done before. So I try to continue to stretch myself and continue to grow as much as I can in all realms of writing. From the sales and marketing piece to the actual act of writing itself.
When you look at all of that as a whole, what do you feel like the sales and marketing is the hardest part, or do you feel like getting out and doing social media is hardest?
I mean, social media takes a lot of time. It really does. But it's so I had no idea just how important social media was to the release and life of a book. Um, I mean, I enjoy it, but I think that we're all Southerners, so I think that when you are marketing and promoting yourself, it almost seems rude. So hey, look at me, look what I can do, because it's in a way I oftentimes feel like I'm bragging. So I try to do it in such a way that I hope isn't obnoxious.
We do try to be humble as Southerners, and
Well,
so I understand what you mean.
absolutely, absolutely. I think that more than anything, through this whole process, if I'm not anything else, it's I'm grateful. You just never know what's going to happen when you're getting ready to release a book out into the world. It was like a couple of months out, and it dawned on me, and I never thought about it before. Someone's might actually read this book. I wrote it, then we're all so anxious and desperate to get our writing out into the world, and then when it's about to happen, I was terrified. People are going to read this. Some people are going to love it. Some people are going to hate it. Some people aren't going to know what they think about the book. So it's just it's certainly been a very interesting experience, but one for which I'm extremely grateful. I think that coming up with a small press and being an unknown, I just things just couldn't have gone more beautifully, I think. So I'm very, very happy about that. And I've had an opportunity to meet lovely people like you who take the time out of their day to sit down and talk to me about it.
That's very kind of you. Thank you. You had mentioned being with a small press. What motivated you to onto your publishing journey?
Yeah, I wasn't. I think that my whole goal and vision for myself as a writer never was to conquer the world. What I hope for, and what I still hope for myself, is to be able to write stories for them to be able to make their way out into the world and to have a humble readership. Have those groups of loyal, lovely readers who look forward to your next book coming out. And if more happens, that's just icing on the cake. So I wasn't really quite sure. I always felt like somehow the book would make its way out into the world. I just had that feeling. But as writers, we hear a lot more no's than we hear yeses. I have an agent, but it's interesting. When it was all said and done, he didn't sell the book. I did, and I was out on submission during a really challenging time. The world had not quite gone into shelter in place yet, so the world was normal. A few months out, and I was out into the world of submission, all heck broke loose. So it was just a really challenging time. We had some. Everyone was really lovely about it. I like to say that I've been rejected by the biggest names in publishing. And they all had lovely things to say. I think one of the most interesting things that I learned along the way is how subjective it all is. One editor might say, "Oh, I love the women's voices." The next editor would say, "Oh, I didn't connect with the women's voices." So it's just, it's all just so extremely subjective. But I think that what we all have to remember is that there's going to be someone. It only takes one person to love your book, right? Well, maybe two: an agent and an editor.
Mm-hmm. That's very true. And I started this whole process about the same time as you. I started looking for an agent and publisher toward the end of February 2020. So it was a rough go, and I decided to self-publish. So I I totally understand where you're coming from, and it's quite the journey, but like you said, we do it for the people. We do it for the great readers who are so supportive and kind. We do it to have camaraderie with our fellow authors, like you all. You guys have both been great friends to me. Um, you know, it's just one step at a time, and eventually, who knows what could happen. We could all have blockbuster movies. You just never know.
Wouldn't
So.
that be wonderful?
Mhm.
Let's all make a wish right now. We'll all have blockbuster movies.
Yes, that would be great. I'd sell for a Netflix deal, so that's fine.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That would be wonderful, wouldn't it?
It would be. It would. Oh my goodness, Robert, it's just been so refreshing to talk to you tonight. I don't think we've spoken live before, so it's
No,
just
we
great.
haven't. Yeah, I feel like I know you. I think
Mhm.
we've through social media and through messaging, I
Mhm.
think is how we've
Oh yeah.
communicated. Yeah.
We've planned to meet up so many times and it's just always fallen through on my end. So hopefully someday I'll make it to an event in Atlanta where you're going to be. Because
Absolutely. Yeah.
that'd be great. And of course, I have to meet Courtney too. And we really don't have an excuse now that you have kids who live about 10 minutes away from me. So we'll have to make that happen. But before we go, we always ask our guests one question. Do you have a favorite Southern phrase or something about the South that you love?
Oh my Lord. Well, so my favorite Southern phrase I can't say in mixed company. So I have to think what would be politically, what would be a safe thing to say? Oh my gosh. Um, I'll have to think about that for a second. Favorite Southern phrase. Well, okay, sweet baby Jesus. If I'm going to, as an exclamation, it's funny because I use that. One of my characters, Edda May, in the Cicada Tree would say "sweet baby Jesus," I brought that in for my own vocabulary.
I love it.
And what was the second part of the question, Stephanie,
Just something about the South that you love.
that you love? Um, well, I think there are a lot of things about the South that I love. I love the family tradition that are within the
Mhm.
South. I love the sheer beauty of the place, and I love the language. There's such beautiful language, and I hope that we don't lose those accents over time. A Tennessee
Mhm.
accent is different from a South Carolina accent, a Florida accent from a Georgia accent, and I love the cadence of Southern speech.
Mhm. I do too. And the kindness of the people, generally speaking.
Right, right, exactly. Yeah, exactly. We're all gonna, no matter where you are, you're gonna find some kindness and some people that aren't quite
Mhm.
so lovely. But
Right.
but but we've been lucky, especially in the writing community. So many lovely, gracious people. I would say that 99.5% of all of my experiences and encounters have been with really lovely and warm, giving people.
Yeah. I
I
agree.
agree. I do too. I think you were talking about having just the small readership that loves your books, and I feel like I have a good start to that, and it brightens my heart every time they write a review or reach out to me. It's wonderful.
Truly. Best
Absolutely.
feeling ever.
So you mentioned traditions of the South. Is there a particular tradition that you like, or maybe even one that's mentioned in your book?
Gosh, so it's interesting. In the South, there are these really interesting festivals that occur. Now, I grew up in Southwest Georgia in a town called Cairo, and there was a place called just maybe 15 minutes outside of Cairo, Georgia, a little town called Calvary, and they were known for celebrating the mule. So in October every year they would have this big event called Mule Day, and so they would have a parade, and it was sort of like a big arts and crafts show and food. So I think it's that sort of it's that those sort of events for the community to come together. I think that are quite unique from community to community. And of course, we all have our own family traditions, holiday traditions that we cherish. Growing up in Cairo during the holidays, they across Broad Street they drape these multicolored lights, and they call it the canopy of color. And they still do it to this day, and they did it when I was a little boy, and I would just become so excited when they would begin to drape the lights across Broad Street. So even now when I go home to visit my mom and dad who still live in Cairo, Georgia, we always during Christmas we always make our way under the Christmas lights down Broad Street.
That's so much fun.
That's lovely.
That is great. Is there anything we haven't covered that you would like to share?
No, it's been wonderful. I appreciate Stephanie and Courtney taking the time to just sit down with me, and it's been lovely to meet both of you virtually.
Thank you for your time too. We really appreciate it. We know you have a very busy calendar, so thanks for squeezing us in.
No, my
Yes.
pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. And it's been a
Thank you.
pleasure meeting you.
Well, have a great night, everyone. Thanks for tuning in.